On the line, we have Unozi Pombata, who's a parenting expert, because today marks a painful but powerful chapter in South Africa's history, the Soweto uprising of 1976, when thousands of black students bravely protested against an oppressive education system. And today, 49 years later, Youth Day invites us not only to remember their courage, but also to reflect on how we are educating the next youth, right? So what does this mean for parenting in 2025? How can caregivers become the storytellers, archivists, and truth tellers their children need, especially when schools fall short? As mentioned, vital conversation alongside Nozi Pombata, known for her powerful advocacy around conscious parenting and identifying and identity formation. She helps us explore how and why parents must take the lead in teaching their children about historical milestones like 1976 June 16, and why cultural literacy starts at home. Good afternoon, Nozipo.
Good afternoon, Kia, and good afternoon to Pi FM listeners.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
No, nyama. Thank you for having me.
So let's start. What's your view on how South African schools are currently teaching Black history, and where do you think the major gaps are? I know that I took history during high school, and I really did feel that there was a lack of African history, but most importantly, South African history, as this is the country I was born and raised in.
Yes. And South African schools, I mean, while there is this improvement since apartheid, but I honestly believe that there's still an improvement to be made in how we actually educate our children, especially Black children, around history. And it's like it's so fragmented in the way that we do it, and there's a gap in how it disconnects us from the identity of now, like where we at now, versus the reality of what happened. So it's so much more than just about isolated dates and facts, but it's about the stories that exist in them, how those stories of people who came before us, the youth from before, like how those shape what is happening in the world and in our present day today now, because that's what gives children a sense of who they are and what's possible for them. So yeah, I think there's definitely a gap.
So there's an African proverb that says a tree without its roots is just a piece of wood, right? So how does this absence of accurate historical narratives in our school curriculum actually really affect our child's sense of identity, especially as a Black child? Because especially as a Black child now, I knew when I was growing up, I was kind of like in between, like I was lost. Yeah. So now that we hear, how critical is it that we really do have these accurate stories, these accurate narratives of our historical past?
Yeah, and it's more important now than ever before, because when our Black children don't see the way that they their lineage is represented, in a sense of that, like, gives pride and courage and the complexity that lives within that, then we have like this risk of really believing that we are inferior, and in turn, like, our children will be like, oh, our stories are like actually even more inferior, and they internalize that, and what I really advocate for, especially in the spaces of conscious parenting, it really reminds us that our identity is shaped by our early childhood. So when you're at school and you're hearing the stories as a Black child, it's not just what is not said that is what is, like, there's a lot of things that people say, and there's a lot that's not said, which also like really becomes such a dangerous place for us, and we like become inferior about our own. And it's so important that like children have access to these narratives that are empowering, so that they can grow up believing that even though, we did have a history that began with so much struggle and whatever, but it's recognizing that that also came with things that taught things like leadership and that resilience that comes from what people did before. So it's not only just the bad things.
Yeah.
There's also things that shape us now.
0861987000. Power listener, what do you have to say about this subject as we speak to parenting expert Unozi Pombata on the importance of raising historically conscious children at home? And talking about home, let's go back home. Let's go to our parents. How can parents actually really go ahead and teach their children the deeper meaning of days like these in a way that connects emotionally and intellectually at the same time? Nozipo?
Yes. Yeah, it's so important because it actually is a personal thing. We must make it personal, and we must not, as parents, outsource it to schools. And yes, schools will teach, but also we need to take responsibility in our home. And it starts off by just asking our children, what do you stand for? That if you knew you tell your child like what happened, and if that was you growing up in that age, what were you gonna do? So it's actually about creating spaces in the home, an environment where you're not just like teaching one way, but like make it really personal. Watch together for like older kids, things like Sarafina. Pause, talk about it, and make it relevant in your home. Share stories around for yourself, like when you were at school, what was it like, and how your parents experienced this day. It can really become such a meaningful space for parents and families where they can start to feel something, and like really deeply connect as a family, connect their children to the history in days like these.
And can you give our power parents some practical ways so that they can still embed historical storytelling in their everyday lives?
Yes,
Yeah.
because the story doesn't just start and end today, but things like that you do every day. You don't have to go create these grand experiences. Every family has a meal at least once a day. So if you use your meal times or car rides, whether you're driving your kids to school, and really use those moments and to teach history. And also like when there's books, if you find story books that center South African authors, really do those. And also songs. We've got such rich in our music, and when you play it and you can dance together, and it can really be something that's meaningful. And you also make history like visible in your home. When you're driving down Winnie Mandela Drive, if you live in Johannesburg, explain and teach and tell children like where this comes from, who Winnie Mandela was, and make it really, really an everyday thing.
Yeah, I love how you're talking about song and all of that, because obviously as Africans we are very spiritual individuals, and you can see it in our songs. You can hear it in our songs and all of that, and the importance of how that plays as well. But let's also talk about the importance of books, number one.
Yeah.
I also think like our literacy rate may just play a role in how our youth really isn't really aware of days like this and the importance of them as well, and how family stories, community elders, and even musical fashion play in keeping historical memories alive for today's children.
Absolutely. Yes. And things like recipes, like if you had a grandmother who liked, who had a special way of preparing meat, and you can store those and start, sharing those recipes and say, I learned to cook this for my grandmother, now I'm passing it down to you. And fashions and things like people wore beret at some stage, and beads, and there's just so much. Even the uniforms that the students of 1976 wore, there's a story behind that as well. And our children really need to know the history. It lives.
Yeah, it really does live. So now we know our children are kind of obsessed with social media, unfortunately, and we have short attention spans, and it's not just them, but it's also us as adults. So how can we keep history relevant, engaging, and even empowering for the digital generation, because this is where they live?
Yes, absolutely. We know the importance of meeting our children where they're at and getting into their world. There are opportunities of using things like YouTube documentaries these days where they live, and you can watch them together with your child, and watch those short TikTok things together. And also, for parents who are brave, encourage your children to become storytellers themselves, and sharing with other children when they do get to school and find themselves in circles where they can really also pass down the knowledge that you've shared with them, because ultimately we live in community.
0861987000 is that calling line. On the line we have Lebo from Orlando East. Hi, Lebo.
Good afternoon, Moloi.
Guy. What do you want to say?
I think your guest is right. It's very important for us as parents to teach our children about what happened in the past in the history of South Africa. But sometimes you don't even have to take it far. You can relate about your experiences. Like now, I'm born in the 60s. Our experiences our parents' experience, because Lebanon, they were passing on that knowledge to us. Hey, this is what we went through and all that. So if you do that, they can relate. And like maybe Ukotaka Mandela, something eco-holy. But sometimes you have to talk about what your grandparents went through, when their livestock was taken from them, and the land taken from them, relating such stories, relating how your parents were also treated by the past systems, what you went through as a person, in that way, even more, they can relate to the history. So when you tell them about Bosobugwe, still they can make reference to what you've told them.
Yeah,
that's my take.
Thank you so much for that, Lebo, and have a great day, rest of your day. Nozipho, what do you have to say to what Lebo said?
Yes, no, I agree with Lebo. She raises a really important point. And I think also what comes to mind for me, Gia, is the importance of actually not also when we tell these stories, not also tell them from a point of fear.
Yes.
Where the children are not going to be like scared and, not even fear, but filled with a lot of hatred and anger in them. It needs to be in a way that is like empowering, so that they see both the struggle and that there's beauty in it as well.
So how do we navigate that? Because it is a bit of a tightrope to navigate, but how do we do it in terms of telling our children the history that we have, although traumatic, but also not sugarcoating the truth?
Yes. I mean, it starts with us, and really like being clear for ourselves just on our awareness about how we are feeling. And therein lies the work for us as parents, that we actually don't lie to ourselves. We become really honest about how we really feel. And we don't have to share it all at once, but as we integrate and make sense of it, the children will receive it from an energy that is more empowering rather than one that is rooted in fear.
So as a parent, I don't think I have enough information. How do I equip myself to relay these stories, to relay this history to my children?
Yeah, I mean, I think you find a healthy adult first, rather than, that you can find places, because some of the stuff is really deeply traumatic, and we carry this, these traumatic experiences from the way these stories were passed down to us and from what we've experienced. But as the good place to start is for us to start our own healing around these stories, and that we go out there, we seek the help where we can get support in this intergenerational traumas that these experiences and these events have caused us, predominantly as Black South Africans. And when we make sense of them and we know how they show up and how they affect us, then when we know that when we share them with our children, we're not now unintentionally, all of this happens really unintentionally, that we are now passing them down to our children, and we're not even aware that that's what we're doing.
And do you think there should be like a movement or coalition of parents actively supplementing school history? And also, if that does happen, what would that look like?
Oh my goodness, yes, absolutely, 100%. I think it could look like community storytelling circles, or monthly WhatsApp prompts for families to share their stories with one another, like going down and doing like excursions or sites, museums, and just like really starting small. It doesn't have to be these grand gestures, but it's really time for us to reclaim the narrative collectively, and just not in isolated spaces where we get to raise a really conscious generation.
Nozipho, how can we find you on the social media platforms if we want to keep up with all of your expert tips as to how we can parent better?
Yeah, so I hang out mostly on Instagram, and I go by the handle of @CoachNozipho. And that's where people can find me.
Thank you so much, Nozipho. And any final words that you'd like to say to parents and, of course, the youth of today concerning June 16th?
Yes, I just want to say that parents to please remember that our role is not simply to teach, but it's really it's deeper than that. It's about us nurturing a sense of belonging and possibility, so that we can actually be proud of who we are, where we come from, and where we're going.
Thank you so much. Her name is Nozipho Mbatha, parenting expert, telling us the importance, while we are in conversation about the importance of going beyond the classroom and raising historical conscious children at home as a whole.